This is Daryl Davis. He's a black American who attends the rallies of a white supremacist organization. But why? And what does that have to do with veganism? Stick around till the end and I'll answer both of those questions. Being vegan is extremely difficult, but not for the reason that most people think it is. What's difficult is watching the people you love contributing to this grave injustice. You know them, you love them, you know for a fact that they are not terrible people. Yet even after you've explained this matter to them what feels like a million times, they still go on. And despite all the frustrations, you never quite stop loving them. But why don't you? Why don't you stop loving them? Why don't you think that they are terrible people when quite evidently they are doing these terrible things to animals for nothing but temporary taste pleasure? It probably has something to do with your understanding that they never quite actively chose to believe that some animals can be killed for our temporary pleasure while some other animals must be treated like our own babies. This belief is simply one that was hammered into all of us from before we can even remember. If it was hammered into some people more than it was hammered into others, then it is not their fault. What they're doing is immoral, and they should stop. But the indoctrination is not their fault. If some people have a neural wiring that causes them to hold on to old beliefs in the face of overwhelming contradictory evidence, then again, it is not their fault. What they're doing is immoral, and they should stop, but their neural wiring is not their fault. So instead of labeling people as immoral and just cutting links with everyone, what we as vegans tend to do is we try to convince everyone by showing them evidence, by providing rational arguments, by showing them documentaries and so on. Maybe some of us don't do it directly, right? But all of us try our best in accordance with what we can do. Now, I want you to apply the same kind of thinking to the issue of racism. I'm drawing an analogy here between how a non-vegan or a speciesist treats some species of animals and how a racist treats some races of human beings. This belief that I am superior to them and I can treat them in any way I want to exists in both speciesism and racism. But just as it is in the case of speciesism, it is also in the case of racism that people did not choose these beliefs. In all likeliness, this stuff was hammered into them. Racism is incredibly immoral, and if someone is racist, they should stop. But the fact that they were indoctrinated into this belief system, or if their neural wiring is such that it causes them to hold on to this belief system more than it does for others, then that cannot be their fault. They had no option in choosing their indoctrination or their neural wiring. I'm not saying that you should tolerate racism. I'm saying that you should treat racism the same way that you treat speciesism. Instead of cutting people off because they might be actual racists, or the more likely scenario that you have some disagreement on the issue of race, explain to them why they are wrong. If you do think that their view is racist, by explaining to them why their view is racist, you have a far better shot at reducing the number of racists in the world. Who knows? It might be you who is wrong. It might be you who is doing the racist thing. Now, whenever I point out that we should be treating racism in the same way that we treat speciesism, there is someone who always says that, racism is far more prevalent than speciesism. So, if someone is racist, it is their fault. You see, the thing is that for the person who was indoctrinated with racism, what affects them is not the world that is not racist. It is the people who indoctrinated them who were racists or who are racists. And those people who indoctrinated this person clearly, evidently, did an adequate job. And in this scenario, I think what we need to do is we need to convince this person that their worldview is flawed. Now, I've been applying this way of thinking of talking to people instead of cutting them off to the issue of veganism and animal rights for a very long time, for as long as I have been vegan. But it was only when I came across Sam Harris's views on free will that I was comprehensively able to state the basis of wanting to have conversations instead of just cutting people off when we disagree about them on a fundamental moral issue. Amongst other things, Dr. Harris points out that we can't really control our thoughts. We can't control which thoughts we're going to have. Thoughts just arise in consciousness. So you can't really blame people for having certain beliefs and worldviews, even if those beliefs and worldviews lead them to doing immoral things. All we can do is we can try to have a conversation with them and demonstrate to them why their worldview is flawed, why their belief is wrong. Please note that not being able to control which thoughts you have does not mean that you can never have a change in opinion. After all, any reasonable person has had a change in opinion at some point in their life. Not being able to control which thoughts you have just means that you can never control which arguments will convince you and which ones won't convince you. So as animal rights advocates, it is our job to try our best and hope that an argument will convince someone who currently participates in this grave moral atrocity. Now, it took me a while to really act in accordance to this rational conclusion, right? Until I found the TED Talk of Daryl Davis. Daryl Davis goes to the rallies of the KKK, which is a white supremacist organization. He does this because he goes there and he befriends members of the KKK. He makes friends with them, he talks to them, and ultimately this has caused multiple members of the KKK to leave the organization because they no longer agree with its tenets, because they no longer agree with the idea of white supremacy. As a lot of you are probably already aware, recently there was a Twitter mob that was coming right after me, right? Because I had made a response video to an anti-animal rights tweet that went viral. The mob mass reported my video, obviously. But that's not where it ends. Further, the mob not only baselessly accused me of racism, they simultaneously used racist slurs and stereotypes against me. For a brief moment, and by a brief moment I mean a day or two, I hated their guts. But then I realized that these are probably not bad people, right? These racists are probably not bad people. They are probably good people acting under the influence of bad ideas. You see, if I can be friends with people who literally pay for the killing and exploitation of other animals for temporary taste pleasure, and if Daryl Davis can be friends with people who literally want him dead, then I think that if someone uses racial slurs and racial stereotypes against me, I think I can at least go without absolutely hating them. And I can definitely not absolutely hate people for having minor disagreements with me on the issue of race and racism. By the way, in order to watch the video that caused the Twitter mob to be that angry, click here. If you would like to receive early access to my videos as well as vote on which videos I make, click here. Do be sure to leave your thoughts in the comment section down below and I'll see you there.